It is a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dianne Glasscoe Watterson, RDH, BS, MBA, 4 decades in dentistry. Her business, Watterson Speaking Consulting LLC, is based in Lexington, Lexington, North Carolina.
Right.
There is a Lexington, Kentucky, though.
There is.
Yeah. Since 1997, Dianne has been published extensively, including authoring 2 monthly columns in national dental publications, one in dental economics called Practice Wisdom, and the other in RDH called Staff RX. Dianne is a well-known provider of continuing education for dental professionals and has presented for associations and major dental meetings across the U.S. In addition to serving on the editorial board of RDH Magazine, Dianne is a co-author of Foundations of Periodontics for the Dental Hygienist, a text used in many hygiene programs. She has published 2 books, Manage Your Practice Well and The Consummate Dental Hygienist. Dianne was honored by Dentsply as a distinguished dental professional in 2005. Also, Dianne was honored by Colgate in 2009 and 2010 as a key opinion leader and serves on their Oral Health Advisory Board. Dianne has been chosen as a leader in consulting speaking by Dentistry Today every year since 2006. She is a member of the Christian Medical Dental Association, American Association of Dental Office Managers, American Academy of Dental Hygiene, and American Dental Hygienist Association. Thank you so much for being on my show today. You are a legend. That must be a hell of an honor to be distinguished by Dentsply, Colgate, all the boards you sit on. Thanks for giving me an hour of your life today.
My pleasure, Howard.
And we're 2 kindred spirits because we're both in dentistry and we both have 4 sons. So,
yes, we do.
My gosh, did you survive your 4 sons?
Yeah. Well, I have to fess up. 2 of my sons are stepsons, but we have 4 boys. When we get them all together, that's lots of testosterone there.
I would like to find someone. I'd like to make 2 of my boys stepsons, but I can't find any girl that'll take them. And but anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So I'll just start. What's new in dental hygiene? I mean, you've been doing this for 4 decades. We just had this is the summer, so we just graduated a whole new class of hygienists. What's different in hygiene from when you came out back in what was it, 1978?
Yes.
From 78 to 2016, did anything change in perio?
I think lots of things have changed in perio. We understand a lot more of the pathology of perio now than we did back then, but I think as far as jobs are concerned, the big problem today for the new dental hygiene graduates is lack of jobs, and lots of states have saturation in their dental hygiene market where there are not enough jobs for the new grads. And so, that's at least what we're seeing in North Carolina and obviously some other states as well. But yeah, I think some things never change. We're still scraping calculus off teeth. We're still teaching people how to take care of their teeth. But big things today are we now know that plaque can be removed with the means other than dental floss. We know water pick or water lavage devices will remove plaque. And so we have to look at ways to get our patients motivated to take good care of their teeth. So that's a big challenge. But yeah, there have been some things that changed.
It's really a behavioral disease at the end of the day. Do you think so? I mean...
Possibly.
I remember seeing a study, I should go back and try to find it. It was like 20 years ago of identical twins where one had the bypass done and the other one didn't have insurance or didn't want the surgery and didn't do it, but changed their lifestyle, quit smoking, lost weight, started exercising, and the non-surgical group that changed their lifestyle actually lived 3.5 years longer than the group that just had the bypass and didn't change their lifestyle. I mean, we've seen that in hygiene where we used to do 4 quads of replaying curettage, 4 quads of surgery, and then 2 years later you couldn't tell you did anything. And then the other people didn't want the treatment, but it scared the daylights out of them that they needed all this stuff. So they started brushing and flossing and, and all that stuff, and they had the better outcome.
Well, I think some of the changes in our economy today, too, affect the way people go to the dentist. And so when people lose their dental benefits and all that, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that you and I could carry on. But all the same, perio disease is still there, and it's rampant in some areas. And I'm from Thomasville, North Carolina. You've probably heard of Thomasville Furniture. And I know back in the day when all the furniture was made here, a lot of it was made here before it all went, the manufacturing went to China and Mexico. Well, our dental practices around this area were slammed with people, especially when Thomasville Furniture Industries got dental benefits back in the 80s. But then when all the manufacturing left, and people lost their jobs and they lost their benefits, and it really affected a lot of the dental practices around here too. So, it's just an economic thing for many people with perio.
And even that's a culture issue, because you go to like Singapore, there's no such thing as dental insurance in Singapore or China or Brazil. And you just go, Singapore is one of the most healthy dental markets in the world, and they all buy their dentistry just like they buy their iPhone, their car, their vacations, their trips. And then you go across the street to Tokyo, and it's all insurance driven. That's really weird. Like they only pay basically $100 US for a root canal. So it's a very weird cultural thing when you start telling people that you buy your house, your car, your iPhone, but someone else should pay for your body.
Well, Howard, I remember in 1972 when I started in dentistry, there was no dental insurance. We didn't have any, and we were slammed. I was managing a dental practice at that time before I went to hygiene school. And we were booked out solid for 2 months. There were days I was praying for a cancellation because I had people I need to get in. I had nowhere to put them. We were totally fee-for-service. Everybody was. And but back then also, the job market was strong, and people were working. People had jobs. And even back then, people working in a furniture factory, if they managed their money, they could still live very comfortably. And so, but that's changed. That's all changed now.
I think that one of the biggest changes that you and I have seen is when insurance did come out, you just submitted your fee and they paid 1%. Yeah. And now it's reversed. They submit you the fee, a PPO, and 82% of dentists take PPOs, and that average fee reduction is about 40%.
Yeah. Well, I've said this, that I think dental insurance or benefits, let's just call it benefits, it has morphed over time to become, now we were lovers. We got in bed with the insurance companies. We were thrilled because we thought with all this dental insurance, they're going to bring more patients to our practices, and it did. But this lover has now turned into this abusive lover. That started slapping us around and telling us what to do. And it's really changed over the years. And it's been a double-edged sword. All this benefit discussion, it's been a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and the pendulum just swings back and forth. Yeah. And I remember when I got out of school in 87, the big monster was capitation. And everybody thought, basically you were going to take care of everybody's needs for like $10 a month. And then that scared everybody, then kind of went away. And now the PPO is getting to the point where it's obvious that dentists are starting to figure out, wow, I'm doing a lot of dentistry for free or at a loss. And when I got out of school, remember, every dentist in the United Kingdom was part of the NHS. And now you go to United Kingdom, and like 5,000 dentists have quit taking it and said, you just can't do quality dentistry. I'm not going to do dentistry for that low a fee. And do horrible dentistry while they're wearing an iPhone and a $100 pair of shoes. Yeah. So, that's the money is always going to be a technical deal. You always talk about industry standards and your co-founders and hygiene metrics. What do you mean by all that? What does all that mean?
Well, there are a number of industry standards as far as hygiene production that have floated around for a good many years. I don't know where they came from, but all the same, we like to see the hygiene department bring in a certain percentage of the total practice production, and most industry standards say hygiene should be doing about a third of the total production. Another third is that a hygienist will make about a third, her wages will be about a third of what her production is or his. And but these are just kind of benchmarks that have been out there a long time. And I'll tell you, from a consultant standpoint, there are things I've found that can really skew those numbers. For example, if a dentist is niched in the cosmetic market and is doing a lot of really high production procedures, then hygiene probably is not going to produce 1/3 of the total production in the practice, especially if it's one doctor and one hygienist. So, I've been in offices where a hygienist was doing about 25% of total production. Well, that's not abnormal if the doctor's doing a lot of really high production procedures. So, you have to look at all the things before you can say. I think some doctors are unhappy when they don't hit those industry benchmarks, so they think something's wrong. Well, there are things that are confounders with some of those benchmarks we have to look at too.
Another thing that those benchmarks, they kind of, they're usually told to us by consultants that weren't in dentistry, they weren't dentists, they weren't hygienists, and when they said, like 1/3 of your hygiene patients need perio, it's kind of like, well, you don't go to a physician and they say, well, 1/3 of your patients have high cholesterol and start treating, you know what I mean? I mean, you either have high cholesterol or you don't. It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard to.
That's another benchmark that I don't like either. They say a certain percentage of your procedure should be this or that. Well, okay, if the practice is not getting many new patients that are coming in, then it's unlikely that 1/3 of the codes are going to be perio codes. I mean, if we're going to be honest, let's call it what it is. If it's perio, it needs to be called perio, but we don't manufacture perio if it's not there. So again, there are things that can skew some of those benchmarks we have to look at.
So with the lower fees for cleanings, where you might be paying a hygienist $40 an hour in Phoenix, Arizona, and the PPO is paying you $60 for a cleaning, some people are thinking about assisted hygiene, where a hygienist runs 2 rooms. What do you think of that whole concept?
Howard, I am so glad you asked that question because I am passionate about assisted hygiene. I don't know of any better way to beef up hygiene production than to implement the assisted protocol. And, I would say you're a practicing dentist, and to all the practicing dentists listening to this, I ask this question: how productive would you be if you had to do everything you do by yourself? I mean, your sterilization, everything, making the patient's next appointment, all those things. You could cut your production in half or possibly even more than that if you had to do everything you do by yourself. And it's the same with the dental hygienist. There are certain elements of the appointment that can be delegated to a qualified assistant that they're necessary, but they're non-productive. So if we model our assisted hygiene model much like the way the dentists work efficiently and effectively with qualified assistants, then we can really ramp up hygiene production.
Can you kind of paint the scenario? Podcast audiences, they're under 30. And so you're talking to a bunch of kids, probably 20% are still in dental school, 80% just got out their job. They've never even really seen it. Can you go into more details, specifics of what that actually looks like?
Well, first of all, I would say this, since we have a younger audience, you have to have anywhere from 800 to 1,000 active patients in order to keep one full-time hygienist busy. So that, and if you're going to do assisted hygiene, you need upwards of 1,000 patients, active patients, to do this model. Keep a full-time hygienist busy. But besides that, there are some prerequisites a doctor has to have in order to do assisted hygiene. For one, you have to have 2 available operatories that are set up for hygiene. I've been in offices where doctors ask me to come in and implement assisted hygiene, and the doctor will say, now we've got this overflow room over here. We're going to let the hygienist use that. But I might have an emergency patient occasionally I have to put in that room. Well, that won't work. If you stagger patients and have them scheduled out of 2 rooms, you can't stick other people in that room. So you have to have 2 dedicated rooms that are going to be used by the hygienist. The second prerequisite is the doctor has to hire someone to be the hygiene assistant. Now, the doctor can hire another assistant and say, now, honey, you're going to help the hygienist some, but you're going to help us some too sometimes when we need you. Well, that won't work. And I've seen doctors sabotage their model by hiring this other assistant, and then this hygiene assistant keeps getting dragged away to go pour up models or go do something else for somebody. That will ruin the assisted model. So there has to be an assistant who is dedicated to helping the hygienist. This assistant is key to keeping the flow moving and the rooms turned over and ready. You have to have a good assistant. And then the third prerequisite is you have to have somebody at the front desk who understands how to schedule assisted hygiene. You don't just throw 20 people on a page and hope you live through the day. You don't schedule it like that, or else you burn your hygienist out. So there has to be that understanding of how to engineer the assisted day so it runs well. But what I've seen is that in most offices with a solo hygienist working out of one room, she's going to see 8 or 9 patients a day if they're scheduling 1 an hour, which I think is a horrible way to schedule, but a lot of offices do it. And so if they move to an assisted model, they can easily move to 12 or 13 patients a day. Easy to do it. Don't even break a sweat moving from 8 or 9 to 12 or 13. And even just adding 1 additional patient a day can, over a year's time, that makes an impact, a significant impact on the production. But when you add 3 or 4 patients a day, that really can bump production anywhere from 30 to 45% easy to do that. So you have to have an understanding of what assisted hygiene is. And I'll tell you, I think there have been some misunderstandings about what assisted hygiene is. Somebody came up with this phrase that I really hate called accelerated hygiene, which in the eyes or mind of a dental hygienist, that's a horrible thing to say, because you think you're going to be running around like your lab coat's on fire, and that's not it at all. It's not accelerated hygiene. Assisted hygiene is not accelerated hygiene. Assisted hygiene is transferring some of those non-productive activities to a qualified assistant. Assisted hygiene is not a hygienist on roller skates running around trying to keep up. It's not scheduling prophies every 30 minutes, and it's not assistants doing prophies either. It's none of those things. If that's what people think assisted hygiene is, then they have the wrong perception of what it should be. So, but what it truly is that it's far better use of the hygienist's time. It's just like when doctors use assistants. It's better. It's non-productive for you to be doing anything else in your office other than what you do at chairside, and you work your magic in the patient's mouth. Well, it's the same with the dental hygienist in the assisted model. It's 4 hands when 4 hands are needed, and this is big, Howard. This is big, because what I see is that a lot of hygienists don't perform those all-important periodontal chartings because they don't have any help. And for me to do, as a solo hygienist, to do a full mouth periodontal charting with 6 readings around every tooth and all the numbers recorded, it's going to take me 10 to 15 minutes to do that by myself. But if I've got an assistant helping me, I can do it in 5 minutes or less and be done. So it's a big advantage to have somebody there to help with those all-important periodontal chartings that need to be done. With the assisted model, what the hygienist will find is that he or she will see more patients and be less tired at the end of the day at seeing more patients than when he or she worked in a solo model. If it's set up right, that's what they'll find. And if you ask If you ask 10 hygienists, what causes you the most stress in your day, I guarantee you that at least 7 or 8 of those hygienists will say, having to wait for the doctor to come check my patient. That causes me the most stress. Well, this is no indictment on the doctors because, I mean, you have to jump up and go leave your patient to go check hygiene, and it's stressful. Well, for the dental hygienist, having to wait and knowing her next patient's already here and her room's not even cleaned up yet, that's very stressful. See, with assisted hygiene, you get rid of that because the hygienist doesn't wait with the patient. The assistant waits while the hygienist moves on to the next patient and gets busy. So it's far more efficient, less stressful. There's less fighting the clock. It's just so much better.
Another issue is you only need an exam once a year. You don't need an exam every time you come in, especially on like a 3-month recall. There's really no need for a doctor exam.
Exactly.
You could get rid of a lot of exams. A lot of doctors think, well, I want to go do the exam, get the exam fee. Do you think the only secret to lower prices is lower cost? If insurance have switched from indemnity to 40% reduction PPO, do you think this is going to drive a lot of more assisted hygiene? What percent of the market today it uses assisted hygiene versus no assistant? And do you think PPOs is going to drive that up higher?
Well, I think you've hit on a very pertinent issue here, and I really feel like what I see out there in offices is I get a lot of calls from dentists who would like to implement assisted hygiene because they can see how increasing the number of patients seen, could be productive. And but you have to have those certain prerequisites in place first. And I think some doctors I'm talking just frank here. Some doctors are reluctant to bring in another staff member. They say, "Oh, my staff costs are already, too high." And I said, "Well, I can show you in black and white and red on a piece of paper the difference, even with the assistant's salary, even with benefits, all that. There's still a huge amount of extra production that comes in with the assisted model versus a solo model." So I try to quell their fears. Yes, you do have to bring in, if you don't have an additional assistant. And see, this is another thing I see, Howard. I go in these offices where these dentists they'll have a couple of assistants running around, but the doctor's not all that busy to start with, and these assistants are pretty much left on their own when they're not at chairside with the doctor. And I think, well, why can't this assistant on a certain day, let's start with one day of the week, let's say one day of the week we're going to do assisted hygiene, and let's move this assistant over and let her help the hygienist all day, just to see how it works. So I don't want them to try to start too big, take baby steps and implement one day a week and then go from there. When I can get them to do it, they call me, they're ecstatic after a couple of days, and they see the bump in production, and the hygienist is loving it because she's able to not have to fight the clock all day and not have to wait for a doctor exam and this and that. It's just a far better way to work.
Explain in detail what you're doing. You're a consultant. You consult on practice management, hygiene consulting. You have a new book. If my homies went to WattersonSpeaks.com, WATTERSON Speaks.com, what are they going to find on your website, and what are you actually doing for dentists, dental offices?
Well, I offer 3 levels of consulting, and one is just kind of I call it kind of a drive-by consult, where some doctors just would like an outside set of eyes to look at their practice and to just sort of dip their toe in the water to get somebody else to give them some opinions about what they need to do to improve. I come in, I get some data from the practice first, then I come in and just do an on-site kind of observation, and then I go home and write a detailed report and have a teleconference with the doctor about what I found and what needs to be changed. I have to be real careful with that because I know that too much change too quick can be worse than no change at all. So I try to major on 3 things that I see that really do need attention. Some doctors will take that consult and expand on it. Then they want to increase to like a 6-month contract where I'm sticking with the practice a little longer and actually do another on-site. The second level of consulting is just hygiene department primarily, just hygiene. And sometimes that involves assisted hygiene, sometimes not. So, but with that often comes work sometimes with front desk people to help them learn how to set up a good recall system and those kinds of issues. Obviously, keeping hygiene busy is extremely important. It's funny, Howard. I'll go into practice sometimes, and one of the complaints that I'm hearing from the doctor is, oh, there's too many openings in hygiene, too much broken time in hygiene. And I'll go in and I'll say, tell me at the front desk, whose job is it? Whose job is it to try to plug a hole in a schedule when there's an opening in hygiene? And there's usually 2 ladies there, and they'll look at each other, and they'll look at me, and they'll say, well, we both try if we have time. That's not good enough. And so what I have to do sometimes is kind of bring some focus to the front desk. I want to see somebody who's a designated scheduling coordinator. That everything about that schedule is that person's baby, and the other person is a designated financial coordinator. Everything about money is that person's baby. And so there's some overlap of what they do, but you have to be able to hold people accountable for certain bodies of work. So I want somebody to say, whose job is it to help, to fill these openings in the schedule? I want somebody to say, it's my job. That's my job. So then we have that defined. So that's in the hygiene consult. And then the 3rd level consulting I offer is just the comprehensive. I look at everything. It's a year contract. I make, depending on the distance from the practice, I'll make as few as 2, but as many as 4 on-site visits to the practice. But they have my eye and ear for a year. There's a detailed report that comes after my visit. I facilitate 2 team meetings with everybody, and there's a lot that goes with it. I look at everything.
And how much do these services cost?
Well, Howard, I base my fees on the size of the practice, on the needs of the practice. I don't have just cookie-cutter prices I can give because I want to know how many dentists are there. I want to know how many hygienists are there. There's a lot of things that will affect my fee. So I try to customize based on what the problems are the doctor perceives as the problems in the practice, and customize my fees. It can be a range, anywhere from $3,000. It can be anywhere from $3,000 up, just depending on practice.
So if someone wanted to talk to you, what's the best way to consult you? You go to wattersonspeaks.com, or do you like email, or what do you like?
They can email me.
What's your email?
Dianne, Dianne, and then MBA. M as in Mark, B as in boy, A as in apple, MBA, at gmail.com. Dianne, MBA.
So, do you when you say that hygienists are having a hard time finding jobs, don't you think a lot of that is because dentists are looking at the hourly wage of the hygiene and the PPO price of a cleaning and says, this is a loss leader, why do I want to build up my loss leader department? And they're going to either have to go shorter appointments or assisted hygiene. I'm seeing, like in London. I just lectured in London and Glasgow, and so many dentists that we were talking with said, dentistry is not a game of volume. You just the NHS with their low fees and the high volumes, and you're just slopping in fillings and you don't have the time to do it right, they get $100 for a molar root canal. In America, we get $1,000 for your own tooth. Could you imagine going to an endodontist who's only going to get $100 for? I mean, she would just try to knock it out in 15 minutes. And finally, a lot of them just said, I'd rather just have, 1/10 the patients for twice the money, and they're making more money. So do you think a lot of, do you think the PBO fee prices is hurting the hygiene job market?
It's possible, but Howard, I've been in dentistry a long time, and I've never been in a practice where hygiene, it costs more to have a hygienist than the production that was brought in. Now, I know some people say, they would think, well, if hygiene doesn't produce at least 50% of her wages, that's a loss leader. I don't agree with that. But all the same, I look at it from this standpoint. I don't like to see doctors doing hygiene unless there are no hygienists in the area, or the doctor has so few patients that really can't stay busy unless he or she does hygiene. That could be in a startup, that kind of thing. Because you think about it, if the doctor is spending 25% of his or her time doing hygiene services, then that's 25% of the time that could be used doing more productive things than hygiene. Most doctors don't like to do hygiene anyway, so it gets relegated to the second column, and patients kind of get a flick and polish. And, it's just not good. I think assisted hygiene, use a far better use of the hygienist's time, and is a better way to go if the doctor is involved in PPO dentistry and the low fee dentistry in that. The doctors will say things like, yeah, I sing all the way to the bank every week because I didn't pay a hygienist. Well, you have to look at, just how much of your time are you spending doing hygiene procedures. So I don't think doctors should do anything that they can legally delegate to a qualified auxiliary. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Ryan, can we edit this podcast where she says dentists shouldn't have to do anything? Then just stop it right there. Just dentists should not have to do anything. That's what I want. I didn't like the part after. I just want to hear dentists don't have to do anything. Just sit there and go online gambling all day. So basically, Dianne, are you saying after 38 years in this industry and you're a legend. Are you basically saying, if you are the 82% of dentists insurance driven on PPOs, you just need to go to assisted hygiene?
Absolutely. I have a client in North Carolina who has what I would call, his practice is not really growing, it's just kind of plateaued. He has more hygiene than they can possibly do with 2 hygienists. He has 2 full-time hygienists, but yet still he's not real busy. And he said to meet his hygiene demand, what he decided to do was every Tuesday, every week, he calls that Super Tuesday. He only sees like an emergency or something like that, but he lets both of his hygienists do assisted hygiene all day. So he's giving up his operatory, one of his operatories, or 2 of his operatories, so both his hygienists can do assisted hygiene all day. So all he does is check hygiene patients, and he does about, he's seeing about 30 people, and he says, I look forward to Tuesdays. He said, it gives me a break, and he said that way we can keep up with our hygiene demand. And I think some offices are seeing this kind of thing, where the practice is just got more hygiene demand than they can meet. That's a good reason to do assisted hygiene. I'm not saying a doctor should give up a productive day like my client has done, but it works for him, and he loves it. He likes that break every week. He's a real laid-back guy. So, I think assisted hygiene is just the way to go. It really is.
So now your book, The Consummate Dental Hygienist, which you can find on your website, wattersonspeaks.com, or on Amazon, does it talk about, is it going into detail about the expanded um, hygienist?
It does. It does. It
Assisted
goes in,
hygiene?
it goes into yes, more detail than we can do here just in the podcast, but it also tells about what duties should be delegated to a qualified assistant. And a hygienist that has not been used to working with an assistant has to learn to delegate. And so there is kind of a learning curve there, but it does go into a lot more detail, and it gives some good examples too of what I said a while ago about the black and white and red on paper about the production. So using some conservative examples that I've seen, I've seen practices jump their hygiene production by as much as 170,000 a year additional production when they went to an assisted model. Howard, in anybody's eyes, that is significant. So I think it's worth examining.
So you have two books. Talk about both of your books. This one was The Consummate Dental Hygienist, and what was the other one called?
The other one is called Manage Your Practice Well, and right at the moment I'm sold out of that book. I am actually involved in a second write of that book as we speak. It's not ready to go to the printer yet, but I hope to have that book out by Christmas if I'm diligent. I do a lot of work in airports and hotels, but all the same, I'm out of that book right now. I've sold out. So.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
I want to tell you now. Are these available on audiobooks?
I haven't done that yet. Should I do that?
I mean, you should listen to Jeff Bezos. He's talking about how one of the biggest problems in Amazon is how many books do I print out? Like you ran out of your print order. Yeah. And so the bigger the run, the bigger the warehouse. So he spent $1 billion in a decade getting a book format where you order the book, they print it, ship it, and get rid of all that. And he says that by the time they perfected it after a decade, the millennials and the Generation Xers, they want audiobooks. We would sit in a chair and read, and it had to be boring because everybody complained that kids didn't read enough, and now the kids listen to books while they clean out their car, do the dishes, do their laundry, get on the treadmill, and so audiobooks have passed physical books.
Oh, wow.
And when you look at physical books, we're giving away our age because, I got a whole library of physical. I still like to sit in my chair with my book, circle things, write notes. But I'm an old dog. I'm a grandpa, and I'm jealous because my 4 boys only gave me 1 grandchild. Your 4 boys gave you what? Half a dozen?
I have 4 and 2 more on the way.
Oh my God! You need to give a course on how to make a grandbaby. And I could just have this private. In fact, I'll hire you as a consultant. Just come in and talk to my other 3 boys. But yeah. So if you'll more than double your book sales if you make an audio book. And when I talk to dentists and dental schools and under 30, if it's not audio, they just say they'll actually say, "Well, I'm just going to wait for it to come out on audio."
Oh wow!
I mean, they just well, think about it. An audio book while you're cleaning the kitchen versus sitting in a chair. I mean, they're just not going to do it. They're too they just think entirely differently. So make them audiobook if you want to, because the reason I want you to make an audiobook is because the person who needs this information the most is the dentist under 30. Mm-hmm. I always thought it was I tell people with CE, I'd rather if you're going to invest a lot of money in like Coyce or Spear, Scottsdale Center, the Pankey Institute. If you're going to invest that kind of money, it's a massive return if you do it on day one. But if you wait till you're 65 and you do all that and you have a couple good years, and so I think that for continuing education, the best return on your investment is do it the youngest of age. Don't wait. And as far as I want to remind my homies, that their labor is 25%, lab bills are 8 to 10%, supplies are 5%, rent's 5%. But when labor is 25%, average overhead, according to the ADA, is 65%. So that means the dentist is taking home 35%. So you got 35% of the dentist, 25% of the staff. That's 55. Chairs aren't your cost. And every dental office I go to, everybody's waiting around for a chair. And it's like, why do you have 55% of your overhead waiting on a stupid chair? I mean, chairs aren't even 1% of your costs. And if you want to get better use of your labor, you need to go chair along. The last thing I need is a hygienist who's waiting for a doctor and she needs to seat her next patient. Well, why isn't there a room to seat her next patient? Oh, because we're saving money on a chair. I mean, just, chair along. Okay, I want to ask you, one of the most common questions on Dental Town is what kind of recall system do you recommend? I mean, there's big debates. Well, first of all, there's a lot of new technology out like Demand Force and Lighthouse 360 and 1-800-DENTIST, Futurionics, Patient Activator, whatever. And there's some say, well, pre-appoint and then send them a card 3 days before. Some, there's literally more formulas for a recall than there is for lasagna. What takeaway points should be in a recall system that you've seen?
I do believe in pre-appointing, but with a caveat. I think we need to be discriminating in who we allow to pre-appoint. And I know people frown on discrimination, but yeah, in recall systems, yes, we discriminate. We don't allow. It is a privilege for a person to be allowed to have time in our system 6 months from now. And so we choose who we give that option to. And so people that have a history of late cancellation or no-show, I don't believe it is prudent to pre-appoint those people unless it was just a one-time thing. We have to be discriminating. It's just not smart to give a patient an appointment 6 months away when he or she has a history of late cancel. So for those people, I say, so now you're going to be due to come back in March, and so we will contact you when it's close to that time. That way we can get you scheduled then. So I just want to be discriminating. And I do believe in the technology today. It's a communication tool. I'm particularly fond of the Lighthouse program. It is one of the best, I think, out there. I've seen it in numerous offices. Staff members like it. It's user-friendly. And so they don't pay me. I'm not getting any money for saying that, but I do like it. And I've seen it in a lot of offices. So, yeah, I think we need to pre-appoint, but with a caveat, we've got to be discriminating.
Didn't Lighthouse 360 just got sold to Yodel, or did you hear that?
No, I have not heard that.
I thought, yeah. So Yodel, which is a huge company, bought Lighthouse 360, and now Yodel's for sale.
Oh, my word.
All kinds of mergers. And you're up there in North Carolina where the biggest, where Serona and Dentsply just got married. Lots of mergers and acquisitions. I mean, that's a monster company now. I mean, huge Serona of Germany and huge Dentsply. And you gotten honored by Dentsply as a distinguished dental professional. Do you think that marriage between Dentsply and Serona will that change? Will that have any effect on the practice or your world?
You hope that they'll be able to operate more efficiency married like that. I don't know. It remains to be seen, I would say.
I want to ask you another very controversial hygiene issue that you see on the dental boards all the time, and that is some people, because of the low PPO prices and because of the benefits with fluoride treatments, some people are saying every patient should have a fluoride treatment, and it's got to be, it's going to be like a $15 or $20 out-of-pocket copayment for that. And a lot of these kids that you're talking to, like I say, most of the people you're talking to are under 30, and they're going and getting jobs at corporate, and a lot of corporate demands that you sell a fluoride treatment out of pocket, out of it's not a cover, an extra fee. And some say that that's stressful for them, and some of the patients get upset, whatever. What do you think of that?
I've written about that before. I've had the inquiries from hygienists about it, like doctor went to a meeting and found out that that fluoride treatments could be a quote-unquote profit center for the practice and this and that. Howard, if I haven't had any caries in over 30 years. I have excellent oral hygiene. I don't take meds that dry my mouth out. I don't have risk factors for caries or perio. I just don't have them. Do I need a topical fluoride treatment? Well, the answer is no. And if you read the ADA paper that they published on topical fluoride use, I think it was published in 2006 or something like that. It is an excellent paper. It is science-based, and they delineate in that paper who would benefit from fluoride. We're supposed to look at risk factors and make those decisions and not just willy-nilly say everybody's going to get it. So, I mean, I don't think that's ethical. I'm just my opinion, but I don't think it's ethical.
My gosh, I wish you would post that paper on Dental Town. Could you do that?
I can. I need to make a note to remember to do that. But yeah, the ADA came out with a really good science-based recommendations for topical fluoride use.
Oh, and please post that on Dental Town.
It's excellent. And that's what I always refer back to. And I think some adults, yes, indeed, need topical fluoride because they have the risk factors. But we are, as dental professionals, we're supposed to make those judgment calls based on the patient's risk factor. Another thing is bite wings. I mean, again, do I need bite wings once a year when I haven't had caries in over 30 years? I don't have a history of perio. I don't have any implants. I mean, if you look, the ADA also has a paper on radiographic frequency, and they say for somebody like me that doesn't have the risk factors and all those things, I should get bite wings every 24 to 36 months. And a lot of people don't realize that there aren't even any guidelines out there for those kinds of things.
Do you think the reason I have not had a cavity since freshman year of college in 1980 is because the Jameson whiskey acts just like Listerine? I mean, at the end of the day, isn't Listerine just whiskey?
I guess it could be.
They're both the same percentage of alcohol. I want to continue on that theme because a lot of these dentists and hygienists working in corporate, no names mentioned, but they're also told not only do they have to do a fluoride treatment on all the patients, and that's a co-payment, and that's a big part of their production, profitability, even bonus, but also when there's a 5 or 6 millimeter pocket, they're supposed to put in these perio chips, tetracycline, hard things into the pockets, and those also are co-payment per chip. I've seen, dentists or patients coming out with these treatment plans where, they had 20 chips placed in, and they were, $10, $15 a piece, and they were, it's a big chunk of change. What have you seen that? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've seen it. Unfortunately, I have. I was in a practice down in Florida where the hygienists were instructed for every patient, they automatically treatment planned one of the site-specific perio treatments for every patient, and before they've even looked in the patient's mouth. That just does not. That's not who I am, and.
Was her name?
But listen, I'm not against these things either. I think some of them have some good science to support their use in certain situations. Again, as dental professionals, we're supposed to look at the risk factors and the need for such things. Just like if I take my car to an auto mechanic, I don't know diddly about car motors, but I don't want my auto mechanic telling me that I need all this stuff done just to beef up his production that day. I mean, it's unethical. And so, hygienists don't have any input into the decisions that doctors make about how they want to run their practices. If doctors make the decision to take reduced fees and those kinds of things, and I'm not indicting anybody. I think there are certain areas of the country where they'd probably go bankrupt if they didn't take some PPO dentistry. But all the same, hygienists don't have any input into any of that, nor should they. They're not practice owners. But I don't think hygienists should be penalized either for those decisions that are made on business level that affect them, and sometimes cause them to have to compromise their own ethics in order to keep their jobs. It's just not right.
No, but you said some. I agree. A doctor-patient relationship is a very customized, personal thing. And when people start saying that all people need fluoride treatments or all people need,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not even doctors. And I'll take it one step further. Like, a lot of doctors don't even have like amalgam in their office. It's like,
Yeah.
if you tell me you have 2,000 patients and you don't have one instance, like maybe a root surface decay underneath an amalgam. One of the most amazing dentists in the world, Jason Smithson, the other day posted a case of an amalgam. And people were saying, why did you do amalgam? He's like, because the decay went all the way to the bone. What do you want me to be, a cosmetic dentist on the back of a second molar because you're amalgam-free or metal-free? I mean, I think anybody that's into extremists, like my two oldest sisters are nuns, and I don't want to get they're Catholic nuns, but I mean, sometimes their thinking is so black and white extremist, you know what I mean? And there's a time. Well, look at Alzheimer's patients. They don't even recognize their children, and you're doing composite fillings on class 5s when you know the ugly black amalgam would last 3 or 4 times longer. But you did say, but no, I was come back. You did say that some of them had circumstances where they were effective. So I was wondering what brands or what conditions do you think a site-specific perio chip or tetracycline delivery system, when do you think that's good?
Well, I'll tell you, the deeper the pocket goes, the less success a hygienist is going to have with closed debridement, such as root planing and scaling. And there's some good science to support the use of Arrestin in furcation involvement situations and in deep pocket areas. Most insurances don't want to cover it unless it's after the 3 month when you start the maintenance after the root planing scaling is finished. But again, I don't think we ought to treatment plan those kinds of adjunctive treatments until we've made a judgment call whether the patient really needs it or not. There's the site specifics are Arrestin. There's another one called Atrodox that is a site-specific antibiotic treatment. Howard, some of the things with perio, though, that have changed, we know that there are a lot of periodontal situations that there are lots of viruses there. And we also know that viruses are not sensitive to antibiotics. So some of the site-specific antibiotics are not effective when the patient's carrying around a high viral load. And there have been some really good case histories written up about Dr. Slots has been doing a lot of work with viruses in perio. So that's why these site-specifics seem to help some people, and some people they don't seem to help at all. Well, we now understand that some people are walking around with a high viral load associated with their perio.
Now, the perio chip is a thin wafer chlorhexidine. Arrestin is minocycline, kind of a derivative of tetracycline. Do you ever recommend sometimes a patient just give them a prescription for like tetracycline, 250 milligrams, a couple times a day, or doxycycline? Do you ever do a full systemic antibiotic anymore for periodontal disease?
Well, it's controversial. You'll read varying opinions on it, but I believe, and I've seen clinically, there are some patients that will do much better with a systemic antibiotic than they will without it. And again, which antibiotic do you give the patient? Well, that depends. And I think to make that decision, sometimes a microbiologic profile is a good way to go. Like with some of the culturing that's done, the DNA culturing and that kind of thing. There's some labs around that do that. So I do think we need to be discriminating with antibiotics, though. We used to just give them pretty liberally to our patients, and we just don't do that anymore because of so much resistance.
So is there any DNA testing company that you like or recommend?
Well, Tom Rams, runs a lab up at Temple University, and Dr. Slots out on the West Coast. Slots has a lab.
What's his first name?
Jorgen Slots.
How do you spell Jorgen?
Jorgen. I
What,
guess
Jorgen Slots out in California?
Yes, he's at the University of Southern California and a USC. And then there's another company in Tennessee that's called Oral DNA that they do a swish and spit kind of protocol with the patient. You have the patient swish around with this acetic acid stuff, and they spit it in a little vial, and you mail that off to the Oral DNA people, and they do an analysis. The limitation with any of these is that, especially with Oral DNA, is they only test for about 11 things. So, and there are far more things that can be involved, but there are 11 most putative pathogens, and they can test for. So then they send you an analysis back after they get it and tell you what they found and which antibiotic will be most.
Do you think it's ironic that Oral DNA, a swish and spit, is from Tennessee, where also the birthplace of Jack Daniels?
It could be. I hadn't thought about that.
Is that a correlation or is that a cause effect?
I don't know. That's a great observation.
You are just a wealth of information. I could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights. I just want to ask you one last question. It seems like if you talk to dentists, the big Godzilla is corporate dentistry. And now most the experts say it's about 12% of the market, and some think it's gonna take it all over or whatever. I'm old school in the fact that if you're cleaning my teeth, or say you're doing any service, say you're cutting my hair, just imagine me with hair, a big bouffant, I'm looking like Matt Damon right now, or a massage or a mani-pedi. What is the advantage of when you're cleaning my teeth that you're part of 1,000 dental offices from coast to coast? If you were doing a mani-pedi on me, what is the advantage that this lady is part of a 50-state corporate chain? I mean, I just don't. I see the scales of economy in manufacturing a car, in manufacturing light bulbs. I don't see the scales of economy in a service industry that's a totally patient, hygienist, trust relationship. I'm here to help you, and I don't care about all the benchmark numbers. This is your exact situation. What do you think of corporate, and how big of a factor? Where do you think it's going to be in 10 years?
I don't think corporate's going to take over dentistry. It could, but I certainly don't think it will in my lifetime. Again, I think you answered your own question when you stated the one-on-one relationships that we have with patients. The reason people like us and come to us is because we formed a relationship with them, and I don't think in the corporate world that kind of thing happens that often. Patients come in big offices where they don't see the same hygienist each time, they don't see the same dentist. There's a lot of turnover. Even if the same person was there, they might not see them. So I do see more dentists coming together, though, and forming their own small groups, and dentists forming their own, like within a town or 2 towns or 3 towns where it's still drivable between the offices. I see more of that happening in the future. I see less and less of the solo practitioner in the future if I look in my crystal ball, but I do think there will be more doctors who come together and form their own small groups.
And and I see that also, and I see that very efficient. Like, if I go to a small town, America, say it's got 50,000 people or 100,000 people, and I go to, instead of one location, I go to a north, south, east, west, that extra scale allows me to have someone full-time in HR, in advertising, accounting, finance, paperwork. I see that scale. But then when you say, I'm going to get another level of management, that's going to take 14% off the top. I don't see what they're doing for you that provides value to be 14% of your costs. I just don't see that at all. And I just don't really see that in a service. I only see that in someone in manufacturing. I mean, I get it when you're building bicycles, but and the other thing, you nailed it, is if you have staff turnover, there's no trust. And all I've seen from corporate is these people coming in with these $5,000 treatment plans, and every time they go in there, it's a different person. And so it's dentistry is not a game of volume; it's a game of trust. It's the doctor patient, hygienist patient. It's a game of relationships, and you're selling the invisible. Like, I always take my car to the same guy since I bought it from him. My car is 2004, so 12 years ago. Because I don't know a thing about cars. I grew up with 5 sisters and played Barbie dolls till I was 12. I don't know what a transmission is. I don't know any of that stuff. But I trust that guy. I trust, But anyway. But hey, thank you for all that you've done for dentistry. I hope you go to WattersonSpeaks.com, order Dianne's books, and if your hygiene department, if you think it's not profitable, if you think it's not right, fix it. And the best time to fix something is now. Don't sit there and think about it for 3, 4, 5 years. And Dianne, the reason I brought you on the show so much is they don't blink at buying a $100,000 laser, or a $150,000 CAD cam, or a $100,000 CVCT, and I can give them a list of 1,000 dentists who do $1 million a year and take home $350 that don't have any high technology. They have nothing, but they have their business in order. And if you want to buy toys because you're a boy, I get it. I have all those toys, but get your house in order, and Dianne can get your house in order. Get your house in order. And then when you want to buy a toy, you can decide, well, do I want a laser or a condo or a boat or a red shiny car, whatever. Get your house in order. A consultant is better than technology any day of the week. Dianne, it was an honor that you shared an hour with me today.
Thank you so much, Howard.
All right. Have a rocking hot day.
Thank you.